This video will cover from Module 2 within Canvas how to read and work with the NGSS or Next Generation Science Standards. The section here in Module 2 all about the NGSS or Next Generation Science Standards is broken into three parts. The first three pieces that we have here for you are three different PDFs, and they're all designed to just sort of introduce you to why the NGSS. Why is the NGSS important? And a little bit on how to read the NGSS. And that brings us to the second section, which is really what is the NGSS and how do you actually navigate them and read them. So these three resources here will do that. And then finally, I've ended with a resource that I think will just be helpful for you that you might want to peruse a little bit more to learn a little more about the NGSS. And then I'm going to give you one last helpful hint to use with the NGSS. When you're finished with all of this, of course, you'll take a quiz about that, and you'll be done with this section. You're going to use this later on. I want you to keep in mind that you will use all of this later on. When you get down to the last two assignments for Module 2 have to do with taking apart, in this assignment right here, the Equip rubric assignment, you're going to take apart mentally, not physically, of course, but you're going to take apart a unit of science study, and you're going to assess it for its worthiness, or how well does that unit align with the Next Generation Science Standards or not. And then you're going to finally end with a literature review or a research paper, and in that research paper you're going to again go back to some of those things that you learned when discovering more about the NGSS. So without further ado, I'm just going to take you briefly through a few of the, well actually all of the things listed here. Again though, you'll need to go over them on your own to learn as much as you'll need to learn. But for this first part, I just want to briefly take you through them. So first we have three different PDFs, and these top two are again designed to show you why the NGSS or why that was important to change the science standards from the last set that we had to this current set. So I want you to remember, before we really even get too deep into that, the Next Generation Science Standards came out in and around 2012. And the reason why they came out is you know, science standards period, they stick around for a long time. Teachers, they get used to teaching them they get used to teaching a certain way in certain subjects within a grade band or a year that they teach, and sometimes we sort of get stuck in that same way of doing things for a while. The NGSS was our approach to really shaking up that the science standards that we had worked with for years and years prior to the inception of them. Again, the Next Generation Science Standards, currently they're adopted by 19 states plus the District of Columbia, and the states and the District of Columbia that all use them actually serve 35% of the nation's public school children. So the not a majority, but 35%, over a third of all the kids in U.S. public schools that currently use the Next Generation Science Standards. So they are kind of a big deal. So let's start real quick. I'm going to bring you through these two infographics. The first is a deal that really is just designed to show you this is how today's students learn science, and if you read through this, I think you'll see, wow, it's really pretty deep stuff. This is probably different than how I learned science. If you are, I'd say if you are 21 years old and older, you definitely didn't learn science this way, or at the very least you for sure didn't when you were in elementary and middle school. You may have began to touch on this way of learning in high school, but probably not like what we see or hope for today's kids. So I'm going to let you read through that infographic on your own, because if I take you through too much of it, then it's going to sort of not make it a whole lot of fun for you to read through it. Next, we've got another infographic. This is the second PDF on this list of the two. So this is New Vision for Science Education. And this infographic, there's two sides of the page, and I definitely want you to read through them, because what it's going to show you is that these next standards, there's really just two parts, the left and right column. In this left column, these are things that education will involve less of. Science education will not do as much of this as it did in the past. And then on the right-hand side of the page, what you're really actually reading here is how the NGSS tried to remedy these situations over here. So for example, if you read this very first one, it says rote memorization of facts and terminology. So if you think back to your science experience, it's very possible in grade school and in middle school, and then maybe even in high school, you did lots of this where there's rote memorization of facts and terminology. Well, to remedy this, the NGSS instead, it focuses on facts and terminology learned as needed while developing explanations and designing solutions supported by evidence-based arguments and reasoning. This is very, very different than this. You might need a little bit of this to be able to do this, but this is, I think you'll see, at a much deeper level. So you're going to notice this right-hand column, of course, it's everything from the left just kicked up about 20 notches. Again, I'll let you read through that. And then if you go to the third infographic, now we're getting into, okay, how do we actually, what are the next generation science standards, and how do we actually read them? And so the first PDF for that is a document. It's 5 pages long. It's actually a really good read. I recommend that you read through the entire thing. It's broken down into really handy, easy to understand sections, and it's going to show you literally what the standards look like. So if you look here, this is what a page of the standards looks like when you bring one up, and I'll show you at the end of this video what one of those really does look like. And this is going to take you through each of these 3 sections. The main section up here, which is the performance expectations. Below that, you'll see, let's see, it's going to lead you to, see if I can find the section here, it's going to lead you to what we call the foundation boxes. That's the colored boxes in the center. And then you're going to end with the connections boxes at the bottom here. And this document will explain this a little more in depth. So definitely read through this. That's it for the 3 PDFs. Then what you're going to get into is, I've got a few links here for you. This is a web version of this exact same article. So if you click on that, it's going to bring you to this page, which actually is the Next Generation Science Standards web page. That's that same 5-page article here, so you can look at it in web form, or you can read and download the PDF that I uploaded for you. The second link here after these 3 PDFs is a video that is going to teach you how to read the Next Generation Science Standards. So if you click on that, it's going to lead you to this web page here. Here's where the video is. I highly recommend that you be ready to take notes on what the 3 sections are with Next Generation Science Standards. In this graphic here, you can see there's the performance expectations up top, the foundations boxes in the center here, the 3 colored boxes, and then at the bottom, you can't see it in this frame, but at the bottom there's the connections boxes. I would be ready to take notes as you're watching the video because those notes will come in very handy for you later. And then finally, if you go back here, there's a little helpful deal that I've put here that you just might be interested in looking at. And this is actually the Next Generation Science Standard Hub from the National Science Teachers Association. So on their webpage, they've got a little more information, kind of a page dedicated to just the NGSS. And the one that I highly recommend, actually, if you go down on this web page to about the middle here, and you read this part under why do we need the NGSS, there's a section called Research Shows Students Learn Better with This 3-Dimensional Model. I highly recommend that you read that. It's going to explain to you why the 3 dimensions of the NGSS are important. Again, the video in this link here will explain to you those 3 dimensions and what is actually meant by that. But this document here, if you click on this or this web page, it's going to explain to you a little more in depth why that's important. and what that model yields for kids when they're trying to learn science. And then finally, the very last thing I want to show you, there's not a link for this here, but the very last thing I want to show you is a trick. If you will go to Google and you will type into the Google search bar NGSS PDF, there's a lot of different ways that you can get to the next generation science standards. The easiest is from the actual web page. If you hover over this link, you can click on read the standards, and it's going to take you to the next generation science standards. But by far, the easiest way to get and download a copy of these science standards is if you Google this phrase, NGSS PDF. Among your first searches, you're going to see this one that says PDF for DCI arrangements of the next generation science standards. If you will click on that, it's going to bring up, it's a long document, it's 103 pages long, but what I want you to keep in mind is this is all of the science standards from kindergarten through the 12th grade. So it's a lot of science standards, and it's all in one document. So it's very, very handy for us. We're obviously interested in up to about page 74. So you're going to look at the first, want to look, or at least browse through the first 74 pages of this document just to sort of see, what do my standards look like? So if I'm a kindergarten teacher and I'm teaching physical science, motion, and stability, what are the two standards that I actually need to address with my kids? And this will spell it out for you here. One thing I'm going to point out to you is in these standards, you will notice, and the video is going to sort of point this out to you too, that the standards for kindergarten through the 6th grade actually go K through 5, and then your 6th grade standards for elementary school are considered a middle school standard. So you'll want to look through these to see what the 6th grade standards look like. They're kind of mixed, 6th, 7th, and 8th, because you never know what year school districts are going to cover certain concepts. So they just sort of blend those three. So even if your elementary school has 6th grade in it, for the standards, that's considered a middle school standard. And I think that's all I've got for you now. If we go back here, so again, we've got 3 different PDFs. 2 are going to tell you why the NGSS ever came to be and why it's important, why they are important, I should say. Next, we've got an article that you'll definitely want to read. It's 5 pages long, and it's going to break down the next generation science standards for you. There's a web version of that article. There's a video that will show you how to read these science standards that are explained here. And then finally, there was a National Science Teachers Association webpage that will have a little more information for you. And lastly, the trick on if you will Google NGSS PDF, it will take you to an actual PDF version of the next generation science standards. And it seems to have disappeared on my computer, so I'm not going to go there again. But again, this is the one you would want to click on. That's all we've got for now. Once you've made it through those sections, feel free to take quiz number 2. If you have already taken quiz number 2, I have reopened it for you, so you should be able to take it again. Please feel free to. And we'll go from there. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll talk soon.